Okay.
The light is dying here, and of course, I'm reminded in the last one of the Dylan Thomas poem, which I've written about, the dying of the light. It's become also kind of thought of the zeitgeist, as well as the Irish poet William Butler Yeats talking about things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. And the sense is that those who were committed to some of the values of public intellectualism, the generalist, the synthesizer, the critic, the outspoken opponent of miscarriages of justice, a tradition from Voltaire, which I'm part of in a way, are being marginalized, excluded from academia, are not being given an audience in a dumbed down universe to say anything of significance outside of a narrow silo bubble of specialization, and that those intellectuals that do exist are now in are diminished, and those that are truly independent are truly diminished. Uh, the last of them, I suppose, the same generation as Habermas, is Noam Chomsky. Now, he gets in because he's a professor in MIT in linguistics in the 1950s, and he appeals in a way to a kind of American corporate entity who funded MIT, of his idea of a deep structure, innate syntactical language, or a deep structure language, which is at some level coalescing with the interests of corporate agenda in terms of their way of trying to create a computer coded common language. Now, whatever about his linguistic ideas, which I'm not necessarily in favor of, and nothing, and he's quite defensive about them in a dogmatic way. The question is, his corporate endorsement by MIT and his professorship has led to a career of nothing but unique intellectual political responsibility and good. And so he's used his position, some would say in a dissonant way, in terms of a path of total independence and political engagement. One of those things has been as a sedulous opponent of the what Eisenhower termed the military-industrial establishment in America, and the way America's wars of independence and America's foreign wars have been wars about money and oil, and have not been wars about political interests, and that way that America masks democratic exploitation with its own imperialist agenda. And Chomsky has also uh, warned about the radicalization of American discourse and life in terms of the way even moderately liberal people are now excluded from the discourse, as the Christian right has controlled the discourse and controlled what is to be said and what cannot be said, and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Um, his opposition to the neoliberal agenda has been clear ever since his opposition to things like Indonesia and East Timor, and Kissinger and the Chicago School visiting those countries as genocide was perpetrated and liquidations were perpetrated of human beings, which was also the case in Indonesia as well. Sorry, in Chile as well. And Chomsky, in one of his famous books, Manufacturing Consent, suggests that those vectors of disapproval of this neoliberal agenda have been marginalized because the corporate control of the press has structured the norm in a deviant way, that the norm now is extreme conservatism or neoliberalism, and anyone who points anything else out is not going to get an audience, or is going to be socially modified, or gradually and through messages through the internet and Cambridge Analytica, it'll all be removed from the discourse. That focus on things like fact, that focus on uh, the big picture, that focus on truth, so crucial to Chomsky. And in that sense, Chomsky is like the dying of the light. I think, in an odd sort of way, as a linguist, his focus on the precise use of language is very important. There's a fascinating quote of his, which he gave in an interview, which I love, where he talks about the structuralists and the postmodernists. He says, whenever someone tells me about Lacan or Derrida, I haven't the foggiest idea what they're saying. And then I ask a colleague to assist me to tell me. Perhaps I'm missing something. There are things I don't know, like the abstract points of physics or uh, neutron theory or something like that, but they've never been able to explain to me satisfactorily, which leads to one of two conclusions. Either they're saying something of such unutterable profundity, or basically they're talking bullshit. And of course, that bullshit of the postmodernism has led to the bullshit of the Republican neocons. Truth is not truth in our universe. And if you are speaking the truth, you're marginalized and excluded by the manufacturing consent agenda. And 2 points are valid, even if one of them is creationism and the other one is Darwinism, and even if one of them is the evident criminality of Trump and his associates, but truth is manipulable. Chomsky's therefore focus on their truth and focus on fact against the interests of the military industrial establishment and corporatocracy is the most important achievement of his. But of course, the light for the causes of democracy, human rights, is dying and probably now has died.